All right, let's get going here. So this is chapter 8, solving our garbage problem, and I gotta tell you, when doing this chapter, there's some pretty staggering numbers in terms of just the sheer amount of garbage. It's pretty crazy. You'll see that as we go through these lecture slides. It's wow. There's a lot of garbage, and how it's handled around the world is so different depending on where you are, and it's very sobering in terms of makes you think about what you're throwing out and how you're throwing it out and everything else. So all right, let's dive into it. So the garbage we produce is mainly three types. So you have the sort of the municipal solid waste, which is what we get collected through the city or whatever. Um, and that's in the US alone, that's roughly 63,000 truckfuls a day. Think about that. 63,000 garbage trucks a day um, being filled with garbage in the US. I mean, it's just mind blowing. Um, and this will be a common theme throughout this chapter that America especially is a throwaway society, and 63,000 trucks a day really kind of brings that whole point home. Then you have industrial solid waste, which is sort of produced in industrial activity. It's rendered useless once it's done. So it's sort of a lot of times during a manufacturing process, you have in between processes, point to get from point A to point B, you have to make something that, or point A to point C, you have to make point B, but point B is useless once it's made. And there's a lot of that in the industrial sector. And a lot of that's really nasty stuff, unfortunately. And then you have biohazard waste, which is, materials that come from healthcare or laboratories. And obviously, those are really, you got to be very careful with as well because, they could transmit disease. And, you'll see a few stories as we go along about the way it used to be, so to speak. And every once in a while, you'll still hear about these types of things where you have needles washing up on beaches and stuff like that. So those are the three main types of garbage that you kind of think about and how you deal with it in a sustainable society. I mean, that's the whole point of this chapter is looking at what kind of garbage is being produced and how to better manage it over time. And then sort of the ultimate goal is to get to zero waste, which we'll talk about right at the end. Is that even achievable? So managing our waste is, obviously at the forefront of how you get to that point. You have to start somewhere. And what I learned out of this chapter is, there are baby steps. Just like everything else, you can't go from 0 to 100. It's got to be incremental because all of the infrastructure is in place already to do it the way we're doing it now. But there are people, communities, and companies looking at how to solve these problems in a way that become, and other countries too, that become make it more sustainable over time. And that's how we're going to look at this. So now the way we have it are, we have what are called dumps, landfills, and we'll look at all of these as we go along. Now, dumps are open trash pits that have a tendency to be unregulated and illegal. So people just start dumping garbage. Now that seems foreign to us because in most places in this country, our garbage is picked up by the municipal sanit. You put your garbage out or whatever, and they come get it. In a lot of parts of the world, that's not the case. People just literally they'll just start dumping garbage illegally, and because people see that it's being dumped there, it becomes a snowball effect where more and more people are dumping it there. Now, obviously, this is a huge, uh, you know, issue for the climate too, because all of this is being just dumped, and as garbage breaks down, it creates just copious amounts of methane, lots and lots of methane and carbon dioxide, which are really bad greenhouse gases. That's what that GHG is, greenhouse gases. And then on top of that, it attracts what? Insects and vermin, rats, things like that. So it becomes a health risk. Now, the picture you're looking at there, I don't know exactly where that is, but in a lot of places in the world, in South America, Middle America, and over in Southeast Asia and parts of Africa, um, people are literally, they live in these garbage pits. They scrounge what they can. They're called pickers. They're scavengers, and that's what they do. And it's just mind-boggling to think about. And in some places, these people get paid very small to go out and find things that could be recycled, that could be reused. That's their livelihood, is to dig through the garbage. And you could see in this image, it's very distressing. Oh man, I can't even imagine. And they're doing that at their own risk, both of their, for of disease and injury, because you don't know what's in there. There could be needles, there could be, if they get cut or whatever, they get, I doubt if they have access to tetanus shots and things like that. So that's what dumps are. Now, when I say dump all the time. I got to go take some branches to the dump. Well, in where I live in Oak Creek, it's not a dump. It's actually very, all compartmentalized, and asphalt goes here and the brush goes here and the leaves go here, and it's very organized. I just call it the dump, but technically that would be a municipal waste, facility, I guess you'd call it. But this is an actual dump where people are just dropping garbage illegally in a lot of cases. And it's an eyesore. It creates a huge amount of odor. If you live anywhere near these places, it gets really stinky. So the other type of garbage facility is what we call landfill. And landfills are regulated and monitored for potential pollution and of the air and water. So this is typically, at least in our neck of in this country, this is what, you know somebody owns this, and then they cite it, and I'll explain that in a second. And then this is where all the garbage goes until it's full, essentially, and then they find a new site. So it consists of a large pit, obviously, that's been dug out and lined with some type of layer that isolates the garbage from the environment, including what's called leachate, which is water that comes down as rain, passes through all the garbage and picks up all the toxins, all the toxic crap that's in there, and then can get into the groundwater. So they create this impermeable layer so the water can't get down below the actual dump. So, and then I'll show you, I think on the next slide is an image of how this works. There's a water collection system to make sure that that water gets uh, uh, right into a system and doesn't go into the ground, and then they could filter it and then use it somewhere else somewhere. So as layers of garbage are added to the landfill, then they take soil and they put it over the top of it. So it's a layer of garbage, then a layer of soil, then a layer of garbage. I don't know exactly how much garbage before they add the soil, but what that does is it keeps the odor down, so it doesn't get too stinky. It keeps pests away, because if they can't get at the garbage, um, they're less likely to get in there. And then wind, wind is a big thing. You don't want all that garbage blowing outside the pit. So, you got to be mindful of that as well. Now, the other thing with that is by covering the garbage, it creates an anaerobic environment, which all that means is there's no oxygen available, which allows it to break down faster by having that. However, that whole process creates methane and carbon dioxide, and that's usually collected or burned off. Um, so there's a lot of science going on in landfills to make sure that yeah, we need some place to put our garbage, but how can we do it with the most environmentally friendly way possible? And then when I was reading through the book, I didn't realize this. If you look at the last bullet point, now I know my picture's covering it, but you could see it in the regular PowerPoints. It says landfills are some of the largest man-made structures in the world. I did not know that. I never thought of that. There's a landfill. There are the landfill. It's called Kill Hills. I think that's what it's called, in New York City. That's where New York City took all of its. It's closed now, but for like 60, 70 years, you can see it from space. It's that big. You just don't realize, I mean, New York's one of the largest cities in the world. How much garbage, and that doesn't even include all the stuff they dumped in the ocean, which we'll get to in a bit. So, I mean, these are just massive, massive facilities. And we got to have the garbage go somewhere, right? So they're coming up with better and better ways of figuring out how to do this the most environmentally friendly way. Another option is to burn it. We call it incineration. So you're burning the garbage and trash, which has been around longer than dumps have been. I mean, people have been burning stuff for, forever. Otherwise, you'd have dumps everywhere. Um, Now, the early incinerators were used to help alleviate the amount of garbage that was going into the landfills. But the problem is, back then there wasn't the type of technology that we have in place to keep all of that toxic emissions that was being pumped into the atmosphere. And in the early days of incineration, it all went up in smoke, so to speak. It all went into the atmosphere. So now the new technology have what are called stack scrubbers. So they have these filters that are up there. So in the picture in the background, you see the smoke coming out of the smokestack. Now, is that perfectly clean? Probably not, but it's very close. The new scrubbers now are cleaner than coal and oil fire power plants. So there's very little being actually emitted. Most of that is probably steam, just water vapor with a little bit of carbon dioxide. I mean, you can't get it perfect, but it's close. Now, one of the things that, and we'll talk about this a bit later, is many areas, especially in Europe, they're taking the incinerators and they're putting them to sort of a dual use. They're using it as an energy source. So they're taking the garbage and burning it so it doesn't have to go into the landfill. But in time, it also by burning it, they're creating heat, which creates you can use to turn generators with steam. So they're using it for two purposes: as a getting rid of the garbage problem and creating energy problem. They call that waste to energy plants, and we'll talk more about that a bit later. It's not the perfect solution, but it's definitely better than massive landfills. And with the new technology, being it's not emitting nearly as much into the atmosphere as, let's say, a coal power plant would. Now, unfortunately, we can't talk about garbage without talking about ocean dumping. And this was a real, real problem, and still is a real, real problem in many parts of the world. In the US and in most of Europe, I believe this has pretty much been banned. Um, but up for many years, like 70 years or something like that, New York took all of its garbage and dumped it in the ocean. Um, and that included everything. If I, when I was doing some research to get these photos, I came across some other things like some nuclear waste dump sites that are off the coast of the state of Washington in the Pacific Ocean. So the top image that you see there is a lot of garbage laying down on the ocean. What's crazy about that image, and the reason I used it, is that is what's called Point Nemo. If you want to look up something, Point Nemo is the most isolated point on Earth. It's farthest from any landmass than anywhere else on Earth. They did a whole bunch of math and figured out this spot in the Pacific Ocean is farther from any ocean or landmass than anywhere else on Earth. And yet there's still garbage there. And a lot of it. It's not just a little bit of garbage, there's quite a bit. So the most remote place on Earth still has garbage at the bottom of the ocean. So that's why I use that image on the top. It's not spectacular, but when you understand where on Earth that is, no place in the ocean is safe from garbage. The other place that I found garbage was the deepest portion of the ocean, the Challenger Deep, which is in the Marianas Trench, which is like, what is it, 35,000 feet deep. They found plastic garbage down there. It's pretty sad when you think about it. So the many laws in both in the U.S. and internationally have been enacted to limit the amount of garbage going into the ocean. It's not zero, but it's a lot less than it used to be. And they also banned sewage sludge going into the ocean. I mean, they were basically using the ocean as a toilet, if you really think about it. Um, and then this is the story I wanted to tell you. So that barge you see right there on the bottom image is, that's what it used to look like coming out of New York City. They would go across. I don't know the geography real well. I've never been in New York, but the garbage barges were a daily thing. And that's a lot of garbage sitting right there because 10 million people, and that's plus all. That's just New York. That doesn't even include all the suburbs and there's a lot of people right there. And so in 1988, the beaches in New York and New Jersey were shut down because of things like syringes and bottles, former bottles of drugs and all this stuff were being washed up on the beaches. And that in turn created about they lost out on about $1.5 billion of lost tourism revenue just because of all the garbage. Now, you don't hear about this as much now because there's a lot less dumping going on. But, 30 years ago, this was still an issue. So it's unfortunate, and I read a whole bunch of other stuff about and we'll talk more about this in the next couple slides in terms of the amount of garbage floating around the ocean. The Great Pacific Garbage Patch. You may or may not have heard of this before, but there's kind of two of them, and the eastern one is much bigger. They, due to the circular currents of the Pacific Ocean, all of this mainly plastic garbage patch gets floated around and it gets stuck in these certain areas. And this is no joke. I mean, this is huge. You can see a little bit. I know I'm covering it. It's kind of hard to see. This is a guy in a wetsuit right here, swimming around in this sea of garbage in the ocean. It's a real deal. In fact, it's roughly twice the size of Texas. That's how big the garbage patch is when you think about. I mean, that's just massive. And about 70% of it is sinking to the ocean. So what we see on the surface is only 30% of the actual garbage that's out there. It's kind of like an iceberg. You only see the tip of it when most of it's under the water. And this is a massive problem for many reasons. Obviously, you think, oh, the ocean's big, it's no big deal. The problem is the sun breaks down. This is equatorial. These are warm water oceans. So the sun is beating down on all this plastic and it starts to break it down into what's known as microplastic. Very, very tiny pieces of plastic. Think of them like mini beads, like super small. And what happens is the fish inhale these things through the gills or eat them, and they get inhaled, and then they start to have obviously issues. You're not supposed to breathe this stuff, but then something comes along and eats that fish. Now that fish has it as well, and then gets it in its gills, and it goes right up the food chain. So a lot of the fish that are being caught in these areas have these microplastics in them, and then you eat it. Not always, but a lot of the time. So it's a massive problem. I mean, I've heard of this before. This is nothing. You'll hear about this on the news once in a while. Because it's such a massive ocean, a massive problem. It often gets ignored because it's in international waters. It's like, who's going to take responsibility for this, right? Now, who's dumping all the garbage? Well, again, it's hard to pinpoint that. A lot of it comes, the U.S. is probably the biggest culprit. But are we actually dumping it in the ocean? I don't know if we are anymore. I think a lot of it's coming from Southeast Asia, but I'm not sure. But this is a huge problem, huge, huge problem. With all the garbage that's created, worldwide, we have to start thinking about ways to reduce the amount of garbage in terms of recycling and composting. So you can see some of these images here, and I'll explain what some of this is. Recycling is the process of separating, collecting, and remanufacturing and converting used or waste products into new materials. Well, hopefully you already know that, right? You recycle paper, cardboard, aluminum cans, some plastics. And what this does is it helps reduce the amount that is actually going in the landfill, um, in terms of just sheer volume. Now, the US has 5% of the world's population. Here's another one of those big numbers, right? We have 5% of the world's populations, which really not much when you think about it. But we generate 30% of the waste. We are a very wasteful society. I'm guilty. I'm not judging. I'm guilty. I know I am. And, but I do try. I really do try to recycle as much as I can. I yell at my wife and kids if they put something in the garbage that shouldn't be there. But could we do more? Sure, we could do more. Another thing um, that is that it helps a ton is what's called composting. And we'll talk more about that later as well. But what composting is taking all the organic material. Okay, so let's say you're eating dinner, right? And you have all this food left on your plate. Rather than just throw it in the garbage, you could start to put all that into a big bin and let it break down into what's called compost. And that's what you see in that top. Think of it kind of like new soil, right? It breaks down into a usable material for things like plants and all that. And that's what composting is letting everything break down back into its um, soil form, so to speak, its basic form. And you can see there's lots of things being recycled here. Sorry, I'm trying to get, and then which can be recycled into new aluminum, and then you have the paper down here as well. Now, hazardous waste is a whole nother ball of wax, and there's no perfect solution for this. It's any waste that poses a threat to health and is considered hazardous. There's lots of types of hazardous waste. Things you use every day, you don't even realize it. Industrial, household, and electronic waste. Um, and then there's industrial waste, which are byproducts of the manufacturing, which we kind of mentioned before. And then household waste. And again, paint. We all paint, right? If you have some kind of house or you want to paint your room, paint is a hazardous waste. It doesn't break down. Motor oil, batteries. Batteries is a big one. And I admit I throw mine out and I know I shouldn't, and I keep doing it and I shouldn't do that. Fluorescent bulbs, those I don't throw out. I take those to the dump. So I've gotten a little better. Any kind of pesticides and chemicals that you use in your house, drain cleaners, all of that stuff is hazardous waste. Now, the other huge problem, and this is a big problem, is electronic waste. Cell phones and TVs have lots of toxic chemicals in them. Not only that, they have valuable elements in them too. There's gold, there's platinum, there's all kinds of rare earth metals in there that could be recycled. Now, here's the big dirty secret, all right? And this is true. You can read it in the book, you can look it up online. Most of our e waste is being shipped over to other countries to be disposed of. And the problem is, and you can read this in the bottom bullet point, in developing countries, there is little or no regulation on how hazardous waste is handled, creating a market for the producers of the waste to pay to have them dumped in other countries for a fraction of the cost or illegally. Yes, many countries, including the US, are taking their hazardous waste and dumping it on developing countries because in a nutshell, they need the money. And that's the sad reality of it. We ship it off, we go, "Oh, our hands are clean," right? Um, there's other, shipping it off to China where you're having, kids tear apart this stuff and all those with all these toxic chemicals. It's really scary when you think about it. At UWM, we recycle all of our stuff and then it gets crated up, on big pallets. I've seen them, pallet after pallet of old computers and keyboards and monitors and all that. It gets all palleted up. I'm not sure where it goes, but I'm pretty sure it's probably not staying in the U.S. very long. Maybe they donate it. I'm not sure how that works, because I don't deal with it, but I've seen it and I often wondered what happens to it. Now, there's a direct link between garbage and poverty. Um, the unfortunate reality is that a lot of the environmental hazard waste management issues typically affect the poor disproportionately. Landfills, dumps, incinerators, and toxic waste pollutions are usually near poorer areas. You don't see landfills being placed in rich neighborhoods. It just doesn't happen. Now, that's just the reality of it. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying that's the reality of it. It's estimated that 2% of the world's, sorry, I got a typo there, urban population. This is crazy. 2% of the world's population consists of waste pickers. So there you see that in the upper left there. They're going through that garbage to find what they can, or they're being paid to do it, and that's their livelihood, like I mentioned earlier. Wow, it's just I was blown away. Think about it. Now 2% doesn't sound like a lot, but when you have 7 billion people, that's like 700,000, that's 140,000 people. 150, wait, I might have the numbers off on that. Might be 1.4 million people. I could be wrong about that. I got to do the math. Might be off by a few decimal points, but that's a lot of people. It's still a lot of people when you have 7 billion people on Earth. That's whew. So, and then like I just mentioned, most of the electronic waste from the U.S. goes to China and is handled in small operations where workers such as women and children are exposed to all this. I like I said, a lot of the numbers and the stories were pretty so eye-opening when I was doing this chapter. Like, wow. And then the lower picture there, that's a dump, I believe, in Lima, Peru, which is a really nasty one. Um, I I did a bit of reading about that, and it's just you could see it's just they just come in, dump it, and then like it's whatever. All right, here we go. That's in Lima, Peru. No regulation. There's no environmental safety precautions taking place. Nothing. It's just literally dumped. And you could see if you look closely at the image in the background, those are not, those are very sort of what do you call those? Like shack type houses. You could tell it's poverty level homes. Now we have to look at policy solutions for managing and reducing waste. Where do we put all that waste and how do we handle it? So what I've done in the previous slides is I've kind of shown you what the waste looks like. There are the different kinds, the municipal waste that fills up the landfills and the illegal dumping. You have the industrial sludge type stuff, the industrial waste, the hazardous waste and biomedical waste, which is those are the big ones that are hard to deal with. And then some various methods to start looking at how to handle it, like incineration and landfills. Um, but now we have to look at other methods, both in terms of how to deal with it, but then the policies therein, things like, making sure kids aren't exposed to this. So let's take a look at some of those going forward here. So, like I mentioned before, sanitary landfills are what's being used, at least in this country and probably over in Europe and some other areas. They're now required. So you can see there's this impermeable layer. They put down this sort of like tarp layer to make sure that the leachate or that water, that toxic water that as it filters down through the garbage doesn't get into the ground itself. Okay. Now, the problem with landfills is you have that whole NIMBY thing. I don't know if you remember that. It's not in my backyard. So just figuring out a place to put a landfill becomes a hassle because you also don't want to be near faults, right? You don't want an earthquake ripping the thing apart, or wetlands where you might, get toxic water into wetlands, floodplains. You don't want your landfill flooding. That would be a disaster, and communities. You don't people don't want these in their backyard. They just don't. So then they take additional precautions to make sure that certain things aren't even allowed in the landfill, like hazardous waste, and then they groundwater monitor it and post closure maintenance. So even after we have one right down the road from me on what is that, 51st and Rawson, is an old landfill in Franklin that isn't used anymore. And it's being monitored. You can see all the tubes coming out and everything. So they have all of these rules in place for both when it's in operation and even after it's done. It still has to be maintained. And now there's new and sort of improved regulations where you have to have up to 24 inches of soil to allow actual vegetation to grow on the landfill, which helps in many ways. It helps keep erosion down. It helps sequester the CO2 being coming off of it. It helps with groundwater. It helps maintain groundwater issues. So there are the landfills, in at least in the U.S., are heavily regulated now to make sure that they do the least amount of environmental impact as possible. So but you still have to get past that whole I don't want it in my backyard. And I admit, as a homeowner, I don't think I'd want to be look out my window and see a dump. So it's hard. It's really difficult to figure out where to put these, and then once they have them, how to maintain them to make sure that they're environmentally friendly for their entire duration, not just while they're open, but even after they're closed. All right, here's an image of a sort of modern sanitary landfill. So you can see in here, there's a lot going on. It's not just, you throwing garbage in there and you kind of walk away. There's a lot going on here. You have all of these layers. If you look at this lower left, you have subsoil, you have clay, sand, synthetic liner, more sand, and then the garbage. So you have multiple layers here in this lower image down here, multiple layers, including clay and the synthetic liner, that keep any water that gets into that landfill from going any further down into the groundwater, including, and then they actually have like pipe systems, as you can see here, which pump it up to a storage tank, which eventually can then be refined, cleaned up for maybe some other use. Now you could they have monitoring wells that go both into the groundwater and then just outside of the groundwater to make sure that there's nothing coming off that particular landfill that might screw up the groundwater itself. The problem is once those toxic once that toxic leachate water gets into the groundwater system, it's very difficult to get it out. And if you live right near this thing and you have a for your drinking water, bad things can happen. And that's a huge problem. So that they're always making sure now with the new designs that there's multiple layers of down in the bottom here to keep everything out, and then obviously these filter, or excuse me, the leachate pipes to get that water away and out as fast as possible so it can't get through the layers. You also have the methane gas recovery here and storage. Now, methane can be used for other things. Yes, it's a greenhouse gas, but it's also a clean fuel and can be used for other things as long as it's not being pumped out into the atmosphere. Um, Sometimes it'll be used for electricity generation, and then you have a leachate treatment center again to get the water. A lot of times, what they'll do is they'll clean it, get it to where it's acceptable, and then pump it back down into the groundwater layer. So there's a lot going on here. So when you see a dump, just know, or landfill, sorry, landfill. So now we have the difference. When you see a landfill like this, no, there's a lot going on there to help maintain. I mean, we have to have somewhere the garbage to go, but we have better technology and more watchdog eyes to make sure that you're not just completely obliterating the environment around it. Again, these are, they have to be sited somewhere. So typically they're going to be homes somewhere near there, and you don't want to screw those up either. So there's all kinds of very interesting science going on in here. And then you can see this image here. This is what's going on top when it's all done. So when the landfill is filled, that then they have a whole nother set of layers that go on over it to make sure that the water doesn't go in, it just kind of like runs off. You could see that in here. You have the clay clay layer right there. Clay is a impermeable layer. Water can't get through it almost at all. Because it's very small grains, it can't get in between the grains, and so that's how they create this sort of runoff layer, so they can control where the water's going and then filter it and everything else. Now, we talked about incineration, but and I want to kind of expand on that in terms of, yes, many areas burn their non-hazardous waste, but it also produces energy. This still creates its own issues, right? You're still creating greenhouse gases and CO2. Um, However, there's a trade-off there, right? So the problem with landfills is they create a lot of methane, and methane is much worse for the atmosphere than CO2, because CO2 can be taken out of the atmosphere by plants. Methane can't. So methane is much more potent as a greenhouse gas. So that's where you have to make sure you sort of focus in on, in terms of getting the methane um, stored separately in tanks and things like that. The other issue with incineration is, what do you do with all the residue, or what they call the fly ash, that's left over? And that's another big issue, because that stuff is nasty. Okay, yeah, you burned all the garbage, but it still leaves behind this fly ash that contains toxic metals and all kinds of other stuff. What do you do with that? They're trying to come up with some ingenious ways to incorporate that fly ash into things like building materials and stuff like that. So, and then finally, that sort of link between waste management and poverty. Incinerators are typically located in poorer areas too. So, it is the unfortunate reality of how all of this works. But incineration is still probably a better option than landfills overall, because you're generating way less methane. And you're generating something that you can much more manage in terms of the CO2 gases. Then you just have to figure out what to do with the fly ash. Now, obviously, recycling is something that we have to uh, take care of as well. Now, we just in this country, we've been recycling now for what, about 15, 20 years, maybe a little longer. But there's no national recycle policy. It's all done at the local level as to how much or how little. And you know, most of us who live in semi-urban areas, that's just something we deal with. We separate things out. I have two bins and I put them out to the road. There are many areas in this country that have no recycling. I mean, if you live out in the middle of nowhere in Wyoming, there's no recycling out there. You know, however, there's not much you can really do about that, unless if you're getting, a lot of that is municipal and it's taxpayer funded, so it's hard to do that. So one of the things that they've shown is that recycling, not every even if you have recycling, people have a tendency to a lot of times ignore it. um, and what they've figured out is that it's better to come up with a system when it's compliance driven as opposed to punishment driven. So if you sit there and threaten people all the time, saying, if you don't do this, we're going to fine you. Well, yeah, that in anything in life, that doesn't usually bode well. People have a tendency to tune that out. But if you can encourage them to do it with either tax incentives or other means, um, people have a tendency to do it more. Show them how it's being used, how the recycling benefits them. That's much more prone to get people to recycle than, if you don't do this, we're going to fine you, right? That just threats like that typically don't work in any form or fashion in life. Now, another thing that has been thrown around um, is what's called pay as you throw. So basically, especially in really urban areas, I believe they do this in like New York City and places like that, where you get charged per bag of garbage. Well, what does that mean? That means if you fill up a garbage bag full of stuff that should be recycled, you're going to have more garbage bags and pay more. So it's to your benefit to make sure that you're recycling because you want to reduce the number of garbage bags you're throwing out. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So we don't have this here. I've never seen it around this area in Milwaukee, but I think in real urban areas, especially like New York and stuff like that, that they've done this. You have all this garbage. If you make, you know, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 bags of garbage a week, and you're getting charged 30, $40, I don't know what it is, but some number, you save money by making sure that what's going into that garbage is being recycled. The recycle goes into the recycle bins. Now you're only doing maybe 2 bags of garbage in a week. So it costs you less and you're generating less garbage because you're recycling more. So it's a pretty good idea. And then you can't talk about recycling without talking about plastic bottles. And we'll talk more about this as we go because it's a massive issue. But there's what are called bottle bills in 10 states. If you read the labels on a lot of these, I think I have one right here, right? Do I? It doesn't say on this particular bottle. Oh yeah, it does right here. Okay. So it says HI, which is Hawaii, ME, which is Maine, and Connecticut. If I turn this in, I get 5 cents. If I am in Oregon, it's 10 cents. And if it's California, it's CRV, whatever that means. Okay. So there are states that will give you cash, exact cash for these bottles to help keep them out of the landfills. Um, and that seems to actually work in some areas because it's a cash incentive, right? I used to take aluminum cans in for gas money when I was younger, and unfortunately, it smelled up my car most of the time. But I did it all the time. Um, and you know, my dad drank a lot of beer, and I drank beer and soda and everything else. So that we always had cans in the house, and my dad's like, take them in and get, you know, a couple bucks for your tank of gas. So I did. Um, if you get money, if you incentivize this, it has a tendency to, you know, people want to do it more. And not only that, this is now a means for poor people to get a small source of income. And it does work. You just have to get that particular system in place. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about composting. And after reading and learning a bit more about this, I've actually considered trying it just for fun. Um, Organic waste is the largest portion of all of the waste in a landfill. It's anything that is food related or, um, you know, garbage. We throw away a lot of food, and it drives me nuts in my family. I'll make a pot of chili, for example, and I eat as much of it as I can, and we eat it that night. But my family hates leftovers, and it drives me nuts. I end up throwing it a lot of away. And I know you could say, oh, you could donate it, you could do that. It's not that easy, especially with COVID right now. It's not as easy as you think. So rather than throwing that in the garbage, which goes in the landfill, you could take all that organic waste and then basically what you do is you put it in a big bin and you let nature run its course, and you get back basically a soil. You kind of see in the lower right corner there. You can use that as, you know, like if you're into gardening, or you can sell it. People sell compost. It improves plant growth. It helps conserve water because the water can kind of glom onto it. It reduces the need for fertilizers because it is a fertilizer essentially, and it helps prevent nutrient runoff for your plants. Now, there are policies around the country that are being slowly enacted to make this make it easier and less restrictive. Now, one of the problems with composting is it stinks. And, you know, this is rotting food, rotting garbage, and it can smell. So you have to, you know, kind of put it in a place where you're going to do the least amount of pissing off your neighbors with the odor, right? Um, but you can buy these kits now. I looked it up as I was doing this. That's why these take so long, because I get kind of go down the rabbit hole. I'm looking for images, and all of a sudden I'm reading about composting, and Um, you can buy these kits online. They're about 200 bucks, I think. It's like an actual like plastic made out of old plastic recycled bottles. Uh, compost kits, and you can get started. You can put worms in these things that help it move along faster. And then you could probably use those for fishing if you fish. But it's the part of the problem is this is being fought by the disposal companies, which I didn't know either. You know, who has they want you to put all your garbage in the landfills because that's how they make their money is landfills. So if they don't want you to not put them in there, um, that's slowly changing. But the landfill companies definitely the garbage management waste companies have a huge lobby in Washington. So always fighting politics. Okay, here's the elephant in the room: plastics. Right? I have a plastic water bottle right here. Now we refill ours quite a bit. I might buy one thing of plastic bottles every couple months, and you hear about this all the time. Oh, you're not supposed to refill those. That's a bunch of hooey. Okay, that's crap. Me and my kids drink water almost exclusively. My kids don't drink soda. They just don't like it. So we drink a lot of water in this house. And rather than buying them all, using them once and throwing them away, we refill them. And I'll refill them for a couple weeks, something like that. So one 24-ounce case or 24 case of water bottles will last us three months sometimes, because I don't just throw them away. I like to have them too. If people come over, I don't want to give them a water bottle that we've already refilled. I'll give them a brand new one. If you have company over that wants water. I actually prefer, and this is the honest to God truth, I hate bottled water. This is an actual brand new one I just got out of the garage because I wanted to replace some of them. I prefer tap water. Milwaukee has great tap water. If you ever, I lived in St. Louis for 2 years. Their water's horrible. It never gets cold. It's from the Mississippi River, and they have to chlorinate the heck out of it to get it to drink, and it stinks. And ugh. We have great water here in Milwaukee. Just know that. Go live in other parts of the country. I also lived in New Mexico. That water was horrible too. So be thankful. Anyway, getting back. So here we go. 300 million tons of plastic are produced globally. That's new plastic. That's not garbage. That's new plastic that's generated globally. 1 trillion shopping bags. Wrap your head around that one. Trillion plastic shopping bags are dumped each year. I was just like, wow, holy cow. And part of the problem, the recovery of these plastics remain woefully insufficient. Obviously, that's why we have the great plastic problem in the ocean, right? Because they're being dumped in the landfills and the ocean still, and they float at least for a while, and then they sink. And so some of the policies that could be enacted are things like companies could be required to disclose their production, use, and handling of plastics. Like we have a water footprint, right? So, or a carbon footprint, they should have a plastic footprint to keep tabs on who's producing the plastics, who's using the plastics, and how are they disposing of the plastics. Okay, that's a huge deal. I mean, that is a great idea. When I read that, I was like, that's what needs to happen, essentially. This would reduce plastic use and spur innovation in material use and design. If you're going to get oversight or overseen as to how much plastic you're using, just like we do with carbon footprints, like they have strict rules on how much CO2 you can emit out of a smokestack. Why can't you have those same type of policies on someone who's using an enormous, like just a ton of plastics? So this would go a long way to spur innovation as to how to reuse these plastics rather than just throw them away. Huge, huge problem. We need to solve this one along with global climate change, but this is another huge problem that needs to be tackled. Hazardous waste. So what are some of the policies that we need to look at for this? Hazardous waste policies were developed using tracking systems, especially in the U.S. and Europe. To help, and they require cleanup and redevelopment of contaminated sites. I've actually been one of these. I'll get to that in a bit. In the US, they have what's called the Superfund program. It's actually called, there's an acronym for it. I just used its common term. Superfund program was established as a tax on chemical and petrochemical industries. So they have to pay additional taxes to help clean up any issues that occur at places. Um, to help clean up abandoned or uncontrolled waste sites. We had the same exact type of thing here in Wisconsin. It was called the PECFA program. I worked on this when I first got out of college. The PECFA program was a few cents of every gallon of gas you bought in Wisconsin went towards this PECFA program, which is the Petroleum and Environmental Cleanup Fund Act. And that, so when a gas station had a leak in their tanks and all this gas got into the water system, you could use the PECFA program to help clean it up because most of the owners couldn't afford it. It's a very expensive process. The same thing applies to the hazardous waste, the chemical, petrochemical. These are called Superfund sites, and these Superfund sites cost billions to clean up. Billions. I've been to one. We did a short little homework assignment at one in Montana. It was the largest copper smelting site west of the Rockies back in the 1800s and 1900s in Anaconda, Montana. And the company that bought the property then had to Atco, I think it was. Once they bought it, within, this was in the 70s or 80s, they were told you had to overturn, I think, the top 1.5 to 2 feet of soil over this massive area because it was just completely contaminated from all of the copper smelting. Everything just filtered down into the soil, and it was going to take something like 125 years to finish. That's how much soil had to be, uh, you know, re- redone and cleaned up. They have huge portions of it done, and there's a nice golf course there now and everything. But they kept, the thing is the city, the little town of Anaconda kept and made the smokestack a national or like a historic monument to sort of remind people of what not to do. So it was a really, really nasty place, but that's called a Superfund site. So the money that went in to help cleaning that up is from all the taxes on these places. And there's way worse places than Anaconda. There's places in like South Carolina and stuff like that, that creosote factories, nasty chemicals with mercury in them that help make things like telephone poles, just nasty, nasty stuff. Now, the problem is that's the US and Europe. In developing countries, they don't have these type of standards. So all of this stuff is just going into landfills, oceans, and these illegal dumps. That's really scary. I mean, it really is. And then on top of that, up until recently, it's starting to change, but up until recently, countries like America took all of our hazardous waste and just exported it over to some other country and let them handle it. Well, there's been new treaties enacted to help minimize that, because the problem is those countries where we're exporting it to, they don't have the means to handle it. And this includes e-waste as well. So the tide is changing. Basically, you created the mess. You have to start learning how to clean it up rather than pushing it off on somebody else. And that's what's going on with all of this. Now, again, this plays into poverty, environmental justice, and international waste management. And this is a huge problem, and it's one of those things that it's not sexy to talk about on the news, but it's there. So tighter restrictions on developed countries like America and Europe, um, about sending their waste over to poorer countries that lack the means to handle it. I know I just mentioned that, and it's a huge issue, um, because of increased urbanization. The problem is a lot of these people are poor that are flocking to these urban areas. They generate the waste right there. So what do? They create these illegal dumps. Okay, and you could see that in the image there. I maybe that's the Peru or the Lima, Peru one. I can't remember off the top of my head. Now there needs to be tougher policies to protect these poor nations. They don't have the means to protect themselves. This is where you have transboundary export. We had transboundary pollution where you have pollution that goes from one country to another. This is the same sort of thing, but it's being exported that way. It's not by accident or because you can't stop the emissions in the air from not going over the boundary into Canada, for example. This is actual, all right, we're shipping this stuff off to China or wherever. Um, and these it needs to be stopped, and the policies need to be enforced. And then obviously the placement of these landfills, dumps, excuse me, and incinerators need to be considered more carefully, not just being put in these poor areas. Now there is a bright spot, and I wanted to make sure it was in the book. The image that you see at the top is of a community that literally lives on a dump in Paraguay, which is in South America. And what they've done is they've created an entire symphony with instruments made out of recyclable. And they tour the world like this. I looked it up. It's pretty interesting. I'm a musician, so anything music related is something I'm going to be interested in. So those instruments you see there, they sound just like a guitar or a violin, but that's all made out of recycled materials. Very, very cool. It's a one bright spot, and otherwise sort of really depressing type of story because those people literally live in the dump. You could see it back there. They built their entire community around the dump, but they took that and they made it something, you know something that they can share with the world, which is really cool. Now we have to look at applied solutions. So what's being done, not necessarily today, but just off into the future for the global garbage problem. And just like global climate change, this is like 1A in terms of what needs to be handled. I always knew it was bad. It's kind of one of those things that you go about your daily lives and you do your thing and you don't really get you think that you hear global climate change all the time, but I think global garbage change is an issue that probably needs to be put out there in the news just as often. Um, and it's not as sexy, like I said, because garbage is something that no one wants to deal with. We use it and we throw it away and we just want to forget about it, out of sight, out of mind. Well, there are some new things in the horizon to help combat this problem. New technology for waste treatment is becoming more and more of a realization in terms of how to better handle the garbage problem. Now there's better landfill cap materials. We discussed that a little bit. So when a landfill is all done, they have to cap it off to make sure nothing can get in there. You want to seal in the garbage so it can just do its thing over time. You don't want anything coming in from the top. You don't want anything going out the bottom, anything like that. You want it sealed tight so that nothing's getting into the water systems. So they're coming up with new technologies, new cap systems for that. You have mechanical biological treatment technologies. What that means is, I had to look this up a little bit. Mechanical and biological means, so certainly you have all this garbage going in there. Having a facility that sort of you see in the image there that can use either air or electric or some other type of biological to help separate the garbage. So if you're throwing everything in there, you're not recycling very well. These type of waste treatment plants can help further subdivide it to get everything out. And then new approaches to food composting have made it more scalable and faster. So you could buy kits now that'll really jumpstart the composting process. And for if you really want to get into it, whether it be a home or a municipal, you can compost at your home scale, which is like a little box that's about 4 feet tall, and you just throw everything in there and let it do its thing. Or you could scale that way up and do it at a municipal level as well, and then you could sell back the compost and make a revenue off of that. I mentioned this briefly before, but using garbage as a resource to produce electricity or energy would offset the need for fossil fuels. This is already being done in Europe, especially in places like Sweden. I believe that's an image of a Swedish incinerator. So the incinerators are burning the garbage to generate heat that boils water to turn turbines, just like in any other, like a coal-fired power plant. Same idea, but you're burning the garbage. So that helps because it's keeping it out of landfills. And roughly it's a 3 to 1. So roughly 3 tons of garbage generates as much energy as 1 ton of fuel oil or coal. So that this is a really good start in terms of reducing the amount of garbage that is going into the landfills and then generating something out of it. So you're not just you're it has dual use. Um, and I mentioned before, what well, waste to energy now makes garbage a commodity. So now places like Sweden are buying garbage from other countries. There's actually almost bidding wars in Europe now because they want the garbage so they can actually burn it for their energy needs. So they're buying the garbage. They want it. Which is, counterintuitive to like a landfill where no one wants it anywhere near them. Um, and so most, waste to energy plants have less, the same or less environmental impact as natural gas and much less than coal or oil. So is there still some pollution being produced? Yes. But in terms of the overall scale of things, it's way, way less than the fossil fuel generated pollutants. Now, the big downside to these is that the initial costs are huge. These cost way more than a traditional coal-fired power plant. Um, and the other thing with that is by putting all your money into waste to energy, it's diverting money from things that might even be yet to be discovered, so to speak, but could be even cleaner. So yes, this is a viable option, but what the author of the book is trying to say, and it makes sense, is don't put all your eggs in one basket. Let's keep trying to get cleaner and cleaner alternatives to the garbage problem rather than just sinking all of the money into an incinerator. But right now, today, this is a really good option, and they're becoming more and more popular, so to speak, especially in Europe. Because you got to remember, in America, we have more room. It's a much larger area. Europe, some of those countries are super tiny, but they still have pretty good populations. So they have to put this garbage somewhere. And so, the waste to energy definitely fulfills that role, especially in places like Europe. Again, getting back to the plastics, we need to move from plastics made from fossil fuels to plastics that can be disposed of and um, or that could be completely biodegradable. Now, I already mentioned, the plastics are just, filling up the landfills and even, being disposed of in the oceans. Now, there are some bioplastics that have come out that have reduced the need by nearly 42%. Um, if they could get this, get these up and running and sort of really start to push to make them almost required, it would reduce the amount of fossil fuel plastics needed by about 42%, which is a huge difference. It's not 100%, but it's almost in half. One's made of casein, which is a protein found in milk, and the others are made from starches from like corn and potatoes. I've actually seen one of these that you see in the cup. I forgot where it was. I don't remember, but it was completely. I mean, it just feels like plastic, but it's completely biodegradable. Now, there are several potential biological sources for plastic that are being created as well, which I thought was interesting. I'm not going to go into that too much because it gets pretty complicated. But basically, they grow these algae that you can kind of, for lack of a better term, coagulate into plastics, but they're completely biodegradable. Another, with that goes along with the plastics is the 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 enormous amount of packaging. I mean, we've all seen it, right? Batteries. Batteries are a perfect example of that. I mean, packaging takes up 40% of the municipal waste generated in the US. I mean, potato chip bags, which are mostly filled with air, right? We're a throwaway society. So, you have to start to think about, make a conscious effort to produce, you know, the use reusable items. And you see that more and more. And we do have water bottles. Now, I mentioned a few slides earlier. See, I still got one here. We do use these, but we reuse them quite a bit. And yes, I do throw them away eventually, but we don't just use them once. That's a big deal for me. I like having them handy, but I'm adamant that we don't use them just once. There's nothing, the only people drinking out of them are me and my two sons. My wife doesn't like water very much, but me and my two sons. So there's no reason we can't share them, and we hardly ever get, between the three of us, none of us almost ever get sick. So it's just silly to just use them once. But we do have some actual water bottles, like reusable water bottles, and we use those as well. Like I said, we drink a lot. And then, reusable bags. Now, I'm guilty. I don't use those. I probably should, but I don't because we use the plastic bags for kitty litter. So I should probably get some biodegradable bags for that. Um, have customers um, require them to replace it if it doesn't last. Now, this is another big thing. You know, when you buy something, let's say a stove, you know, you should be able to be told roughly how long that stove should last. If it does not last that long, you should be, it should be covered like in a warranty type thing. This is being done. In the book it mentioned France has some laws on this, and I think they use stove as an example. So if you manufacture a stove and you say, oh, this stove should last 8 years, just using a number, 8 years, and major things start going wrong in six, the company should be on the hook to repair it. And I don't have a problem with that. Stand by what you make. Now, then you have e-waste, you know, and e-waste is another massive issue. All the garbage is, but the e-waste, we all get new cell phones, what, every year and a half, 2 years, whatever. Um, I still got to take mine to go get my old one to go. I'll take it in and then they recycle it. But there's technologies being developed that with new circuit boards made out of things like starches and that are completely um, dissolvable, disposable within, like 30 days in a mild acid. Okay, so not battery acid. We're not talking about something crazy acid, but they're coming up with ways to use circuitry that requires less and less of the toxic chemicals, including the rare earths. So using things like steel as in the circuitry as opposed to other things that like silicon and still conduct electricity, but iron is completely and utterly recyclable. I mean, you can recycle it and use it over and over and over again in steel and everything else. So there's a little box in the book about how they're using that to make phones that are essentially completely biodegradable. Now, the garbage is definitely a linear economy issue. What do I mean by that? In that, in this country, we have the model is, you see it in the first bullet point: extraction, like mining; manufacturing, you got to create it, then you got to distribute it, then we consume it, and then we dispose of it. And that's exactly a linear, straight across linear process. There's no doubling back on any of those. Um, and that's the way it's always been. And that's what people say. Well, that's the way it's always been. Well, now we have this massive garbage issue. So you can't just look at it that way. You have to start to think about how you can circle it back around and reuse, recycle. Um, and what they found is in places that are going towards this this new model is that it not only reduces waste, but actually increases things like jobs and income. The jobs that are associated with all of this are good paying jobs. I mean, there's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be put into place. Um, and then you have all the design of everything and the maintaining of everything. So the everything that goes into the circular route where you're reusing and recycling as much as possible, it's beneficial for everyone, the economy, obviously the environment. It's just beneficial. Now another big issue, and one that is increased composting. Restaurants and grocery stores generate the most food waste of anybody, and a lot of it's just psychological. So I'm going to read this right off the screen. Okay. What the problem with food waste is it generates a lot of methane. Okay. We talked about that already, which is a potent greenhouse gas. But I'm going to read the second bullet point. I'm going to look at my other screen here. There are many reasons for the enormous amount of food that is wasted, especially in grocery stores. They are selling tactics such as overstock displays and removing even slightly imperfect looking food. In addition to this, most customers will not purchase food if it is near its sell by date, even though there is nothing wrong with the food itself. Guilty as charged. Everybody is. We've just psychologically, we want to see the freshest fruit and the freshest vegetables. I don't want to see, blackened bananas, right? And, the sell by date thing, I'm not as bothered by that. But if it's anywhere near it with my wife, she won't touch it. She has a reason, she says, that has to do with her dad giving her bad food or something. So, the sell by date doesn't mean it's bad on that date. That just means it's, you legally they can't sell it after that date. It's got to get off the shelf. So what happens when they don't they dump it? They can't do anything with it. So there are some laws, especially in Europe, that require stores now to donate the unused food to either charities, you know, to help food pantries and things like that with because a lot of the food pantries they get non-perishables, right? They get boxes of mac and cheese and cans of soup, but they don't get the fruits and vegetables, the fresh fruits and vegetables. That would be a way to do it. The other thing is for animal feed, depending on the type of um, food it is or how bad it is. So this is a massive issue as well. Excuse me, my throat is scratchy. And finally, the last slide for this chapter is upcycling rather than downcycling. And I'm going to explain that in a second. Single-use plastic, and then the ultimate sort of holy grail of all this is zero waste. And is that even achievable? So upcycling is having materials and parts be made into higher quality items as opposed to what we have now, right? Right now, when you recycle stuff, it's being downcycled into, you know, road, road surfaces, or stuff that's made with recycled material is usually of less quality than it is of the stuff going in. What we need to do is figure out how to upcycle, make something better out of the recycled materials, not worse. And there are some things that do that. The problem with downcycling too is that it ultimately uses more energy to downcycle than to upcycle. There's also a growing, obviously our water bottles, right? Always going back to the water bottles. Our water bottles are, single use plastic bottles made from fossil fuels. Those need to go away. I mean that's just we need to enact laws that any water bottles are made out of like those that plastic you saw that was biodegradable out of like starches and things like that. That was even recommended by the Pope because it's a major concern in this world, not this country. The world is being overrun by plastic bottles. China, when I was doing the research, China actually has massive mountains of water, old plastic bottles. They were getting them. export or imported from other countries. They finally had to stop. They got so much they don't know how to handle it anymore. Um, so they're slowing their imports down on it as well. That's how much plastic is being used. Uh, and so the idea is make start to force the hands of these companies to start using completely biodegradable plastics, especially for single-use bottles. Now, zero waste is a concept of changing our behavior and redesigning our system and resources so that all products or their components are reused, resulting in no waste being sent to the landfills and incinerators. Again, this is sort of the holy grail of all this. In a perfect world, we could do this, but it's not as it's easier said than done. But it is doable, at least on paper right now. So the idea is it kind of starts with you and I, right? You got to buy into this concept. So you have to use less material in design and manufacture. So it starts at the prevention level. So the company that makes the batteries, why do they need to put them in such, these containers, these plastic containers? Like, remember every Christmas where you got to sit there and cut open all this plastic that's all sealed up. Okay. Also keeping products for longer reuse. You know, we go back to the stoves, right? You know, make things last longer. Get out of that mindset of a disposable throwaway society. Use less hazardous materials. Look for alternatives. Now, in some cases, this might be difficult, but batteries use cadmium and lithium, and there's got to be better ways to do it eventually. Hopefully, they'll figure that out. And then preparing for reuse, checking, cleaning, repairing, refurbishing, excuse me, um, trying to best get it prepared for reuse, and then turning waste into new substance or new products, including composting, and then other recovering, obviously. So there's the gases, the heat, and all that need to be. And then if there's anything left after doing all of those steps, then put it in the landfill or the incinerator. But you, by all means, right now, that whole thing is flipped. Right now, everything goes into the landfill and it goes down from there. So we want the disposal to be the last part of um, the process, where if there's just nowhere else to put it, nowhere else to do anything with, then you put it in the landfill. The only way to achieve zero waste is by having a commitment from individuals like you and I. You got to buy into it. The industries that create these plastics and the packaging and all that, and the governments who usually have to enact policies to sort of force the hand of the industry. The industries want to make money. That's what they do. Um, some have the mindset of that, hey, we could do this better and everything like that. But a lot of them don't, and they just won't because it's going to hurt their bottom line, and that's why they're in businesses, to make money. So therefore, you might need policies enacted to force their hand again. So all right, I've gone long enough on this chapter. This chapter took me a while to do. I'm sorry I'm late on this, but man, I learned a lot. There's a lot of crazy stuff in this chapter. The numbers alone: 1 trillion, 1 trillion plastic bags. Wow, no wonder they're floating around all over the place. Um, but I hope you learned something, and I'll see you in chapter 9. Take care. Bye.